Alaska.
Madam President, request that proceedings under the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm rising today to spend a few minutes here on the Senate floor to talk about home, to talk about Alaska. We have a tendency, I think, sometimes up north to do things in a big way, a bold way. We tend to brag a little bit about it, and that's all okay. But we have been in the center of the news cycle for a few weeks this winter at the onset of this year because of our weather, which has been really big and really bold. And as a consequence of some of the extremes that we're seeing up north, it has brought out, I think, the best of Alaskans. Certainly the warmth that comes from a northern climate. I think you see that yourself coming from a state where you have some conditions with snow and cold, but the neighbor-to-neighbor response that comes about when we're dealing with Mother Nature at her finest or at her most extreme, I think it is something that really does help define us as a people. And today I want to speak for a few moments to recognize the very extraordinary efforts that we have seen recently of the United States Coast Guard and the Alaska National Guard in helping the residents of several of our communities, again, since early this year. Earlier on the floor, my colleague, the junior senator from Alaska, mentioned some of the events that have happened, and he, too, acknowledged the hard work and the very significant efforts of our Coast Guard and the Alaska National Guard. But I think it is important to make sure that we all take the time to tell the story, to share it with our colleagues, and to share it with people around the country. I know that in many parts of the United States right now, there are some areas that are just begging for snow. I've got sons that are out in Colorado, and they're waiting, and I know here on the East Coast, many of us would prefer a little bit more snow. But sometimes it's one of those, be careful what you ask for, or you may be like the community of Valdez and have 27 feet in your community. That's a little bit more than I think most of us would ask for or hope for. The community of Nome has been in the news for months now, as they have felt the brunt of some early winter storms and storms that have forced them as a community in a northwestern region of our state to really feel the pinch of Mother Nature here in a very extreme way. Nome is a community of about 3,500 residents, sits up on the west coast of Alaska. Most people in this country remember or recall Nome from early days of Gold Rush, but more recently, Nome comes into the national news every March when the infamous or the famous Iditarod sled dog race is run, with the finish there in Nome, an 1,100-mile race where man and animal are really pitched against Mother Nature in a pretty intense way. But Nome makes it in the headlines for several different reasons. Well, this year adds yet another reason where Nome is in the history books, where people are talking about this incredible part of the state. Alaska is known for our tough winters. And again, I started off my comments by saying, you know, we kind of like the fact that we're tougher than the rest of the world, and we brag about it. But this winter has been particularly harsh. We've seen record colds. We've seen snowstorms hit the state earlier than usual. I was up in the state last week. Places like Bethel, which normally average about just about zero this time of year, we're looking at 20 below for extended periods of time, not just for a day or two, but for extended periods of time. Down in southeastern Alaska, not only have they been hit with below zero temperatures, but massive amounts of snow hitting them as well. Nome is again, it's a coastal community, and they receive their annual fuel supplies they basically fuel up for the winter. The only way to get to Nome is to fly in or to go around the water there. And so in order to get the fuel tanks filled up for the winter, the annual fuel barges come in and have to do this in early fall before you have ice conditions out in the Bering Sea. This year, if you'll recall, back in October, everyone was watching the news because of the massive storms that were pounding western Alaska. And back here in Washington, D.C., every evening on the news, you could see these major storms coming through. If we were back here or down in Florida, they would have called them then hurricane force winds, but for us it was a winter storm. But it was a tough winter storm, and what happened with that storm is it prevented the fuel barge from reaching Nome, so the shipment of fuel that they would receive for the winter is not able to come in. Now you might think, well, fuel up the community another way. Well, again, there are no roads. What's the other way? The other way is aircraft. So you would have to fly in barrels of fuel, driving the cost of fuel up, and quite honestly, adding to the risk of transport. So it is an issue where fuel delivery by air, while it's possible, is not the preferable route here. So you're sitting in a situation where you have not only a community of 3,500, but all of the surrounding villages in the region rely on Nome for their backup. So they are at risk too. And without the fuel tanks being filled, what the community and what the region were looking at was a situation whereby about March, somewhere in March, depending on how harsh the winter was, they were going to run out of fuel. Well, if the January temperatures are any indication, where it's been below 20 degrees below zero, on average, Nome is usually about 2 degrees. It's been 20 below and colder for a long period of time. So you're going to go through that fuel pretty darn quick. And then what do? You're stuck until spring. And you're saying, well, April, March, isn't that spring? No, ladies and gentlemen, it's not. Because you can't get those fuel tanks refilled until the next fuel barge can come, which would then be when all of the ice is out of the Bering Sea, which puts you into May, June. Perhaps earlier if the ice moves, but that's your reality up north. So you've got a major community and outlying villages that are looking at a very, very real threat to their community. Right now, Senator Begich showed a picture on the floor. When I was in Nome last week, the price of regular fuel at the pump is $500, that's what it seems like to the people of Nome, $5.43 for regular. That's what they're paying today. Diesel is just a hair under, it's just less than $6. But that's what these people are paying right now. If they were having to fly in fuel for the balance of the winter, what they were looking at was about $9 a gallon. And this is on top of all of the other extraordinary costs that they pay as a community that is reliant on air for just about everything that they count on. So most of you, I think, may have seen the story in the news. Lots of people got to work to try to address the situation. I was in contact with the Coast Guard to see what they could do to help. The Coast Guard was amazing in saying, yes, we're committed to this mission. We're going to help the people of Nome. We're going to help the people of the region. And so what came together was a pretty interesting story. You've got a Russian fuel tanker, the Renda, who's home ported over in Russia. The Renda fills up with fuel in South Korea and was going to pick up fuel in Japan. They got shut out. They have to go to Unalaska, Dutch Harbor, on the Aleutian chain to fill up with about 400,000. They're basically trying to top off in Unalaska. But for those of us who know the federal laws and the Jones Act, you know you've got an issue there. So we had to get the Department of Defense, Homeland Security, Department of Energy in to get a Jones Act waiver so we can top off the Russian fuel tanker in an Alaska port so she can haul up north to deliver the fuel to the people of Nome. A pretty interesting saga just in describing the beginning. This is over a 1,000-mile nautical journey, and you're breaking ice for about half of the way. Well, the Renda is a pretty capable ship, but she's not an icebreaker. And so how she gets through that ice is the interesting part of the story. The Coast Guard cutter Healy, who has been on a research mission since early May and was on her way back to Seattle to deliver the crew after months of this mission, they get the call that Nome needs help. And the fine men and women of the Healy missed their Christmas, missed their New Year's, stayed on board to turn around, go back up, and be that escort for the Renda to clear a path to Nome. Now, I think it's important to just stop here and recognize that this is not the Coast Guard doing something for the people of Nome or the people of Alaska that is not part of the Coast Guard's mission. This month-long journey was the first fuel delivery through sea ice in Alaska's history, but it wasn't the first time that the Coast Guard has worked to get fuel to a community. And I think this is an important point. Back in 2000, Chief Warrant Officer Richard Glasgow testified about ice-breaking operations on the Hudson River. At that time, there were 5 Coast Guard cutters that performed ice-breaking duties from Sandy Hook, New Jersey, all the way up to Troy, New York. And what they were doing was they were working to get heating fuel to about 4 million people in the communities along the river there. And Officer Glasgow testified that as a direct result of the Coast Guard's continuous ice-breaking efforts that winter, all 274 petroleum-bearing barges that started the trip up the Hudson made it through the ice. And he also noted that if the Hudson had remained closed to barge traffic, it would have taken over 21,000 tank truck loads to move that petroleum, assuming that the trucks were available to make those deliveries. So you've got a situation where basically the Coast Guard comes to the rescue. They're saying, we can clear the path so that commerce can be facilitated, so these communities along the Hudson have the fuel, have the resources that they need. The Coast Guard made it happen in an efficient and an environmentally responsible way, avoiding 21,000 tank truck loads. Now, this is not unlike the role that the Coast Guard is played up in Alaska, but the difference here with Nome is there's not going to be 21,000 tank loads of petroleum because there's no road for those tankers. So we did not have that option for any other transport to the community short of air traffic. And so when we look about what the Coast Guard cutter Healy did and Captain Havlik, all the crew members, what they were doing was they were following in the footsteps of many members of the Coast Guard before him in carrying out the Coast Guard's stated ice operations mission, which is to assist vessels and communities in emergency situations and facilitate essential commercial maritime activities. In 2008, the Coast Guard carried out this mission by assisting with 680 ice transits, representing the transport of over $2 billion of cargo. Similarly, just last year, Coast Guard cutters coordinated with the Canadian Coast Guard ships to facilitate the movement of about $2 billion worth of critical goods on the Great Lakes. So, Mr. President, I point this out because I think it's important for people to know that in addition to all of the other critical missions that the Coast Guard has, one of theirs is to assist vessels and communities in emergency situations to facilitate essential commercial maritime activities. Getting fuel, an absolute bare necessity to the people in this northwestern region at a time when temperatures are 20 below for days and days on end. This was critical to us, and the Coast Guard did a remarkable job. And again, recognizing that these are men and women who gave up their Christmas holiday, who gave up their New Year's holiday to assist. They were really nothing short of remarkable. I had the opportunity to go on board the Healy when I was in Nome last week as the Renda was beginning to lay the hose from the fuel barge to the shore, and to be able to speak with the men and women who were exceptionally proud. But I told them, I said, you will go back home and your world will be changed because you will be able to stand up and say, yeah, I was on the Healy when we broke ice to get the Renda to help out the people of Northwest Alaska during a very difficult winter. Well, give you the update. They were able to successfully lay the hose. Oh, I should tell you this part of it. So the tanker gets in close to Nome after weeks of transit, and a difficult transit, because what was happening was with the conditions of the thick ice and the currents and the winds, there were days when they actually went backwards. That the Coast Guard cutter Healy would break the ice, loosen it up, but it was so cold and things were happening so fast that the ice would refreeze between the distance between the cutter and the Renda. In addition to some pretty tough environmental conditions, you've got a Coast Guard tanker that's leading a Coast Guard cutter leading a Russian tanker. We had some language issues going on. Had to translate all this. We had some cultural differences going on. But what they were able to facilitate, again, was pretty remarkable. And I'm giving laudatory praise to our Coast Guard. But I think it's also important to recognize the good work that the men of the Renda did in assisting as well. What they were able to do using NOAA satellites to determine where the best mapping could be, where to cut through that ice, they were able to break through and get within about a half a mile of the shore of Nome. It was close enough so that when I got off the Healy, I was able to take a snow machine to shore. It was about a 3-minute snow machine ride. That's how close they were able to get in safely to the shore. The Renda laid hose across the ice to connect to the tankers on shore. It was about a 6-day process to fuel it up, but they did it safely without any incident whatsoever. We're able to then close up that operation, and last Friday they took off from Nome to go back, the Renda to Russia and the Coast Guard Healy, cutter Healy to go back to Seattle. But that was Friday. I asked for the progress report just this afternoon. They're approximately 240 nautical miles southwest of Nome, 275 nautical miles from the ice edge. So they still have a long ways to go getting through the ice. And you would ask the question, well, why don't you just go back the way that you came in because you cut the trail? It doesn't work that way. It's cold up there. It's darn cold. And there's no more trail up there. In fact, what they're continuing to rely on are the NOAA satellites to, again, help them map out a perhaps more efficient way. But it has been tough. They've got very challenging ice conditions, very steady, strong winds. The weather's given them winds in excess of 25 to 30 knots, but hopefully they're going to be diminishing to 15 knots on Friday. They're working with NOAA and other folks to find really the safest, the most expedient route out of the ice. But the ice forecast continues to see ice edge expanding to the south. So all the progress that they're making going south the ice is just coming at them in the other direction. So it's challenging, but again, extraordinary professionals, and professionals across agencies. I've mentioned NOAA. I mentioned what we needed to do in order to facilitate the Jones Act waiver through Department of Energy, Homeland, DOD. But you also had the State Department that was involved. You had the EPA that was involved. You had the Native Corporation, Sitnasuk, that put this whole thing together. We had incredible local leadership coming out of the community of Nome. We had the University of Alaska researchers that helped with the UAVs to determine, again, how we best lay everything from the hose to making sure what the safest place is to cross the ice. An incredible, incredible act of collaboration. Mr. President, I see that my friend from Illinois is on the floor, and I know that I've gone over my time. I've got about 3 more minutes to wrap up, if I may, if that works with my colleague. And coming from a state that appreciates snow, I think that you would like to hear the rest of my story here, because I'm not done acknowledging the fine men and women of the Coast Guard. They also played a role in helping to dig out the community of Cordova a couple weeks ago. We've had some pretty tough snows. Cordova is a coastal community in south central, and they got hammered. They got about 176 inches of snow. Last week, when we checked in, they had 16 feet of snow on the ground, which is pretty unusual. Not quite Valdez records, which is sitting at 27 feet right now. But it was enough that roofs were caving in, that there were public safety issues. And what the community did was come together, as small communities do, try to shovel out. But the Guard was there. 50 or 60 guardsmen were there. The Coast Guard came back. They were helping shovel. And it was really quite a lovely community story. But again, it's one of those that reminds us that sometimes when Mother Nature delivers us, whether it's winds and storms and cold in the north, or whether it's hurricanes in the south, that we come together as a people. We come together as communities to help. And sometimes we have some real heroes that emerge, and some of those heroes for us in Alaska these past few weeks have been our United States Coast Guard and our Alaska National Guards men and women. We, as I started my comments, we say that we do things bigger in Alaska, perhaps a little bolder. There's a new movie that's coming out that I'll go ahead. I'm going to put a plug on it. It's called The Big Miracle, and it's about the rescue of the whales back in the late 80s. Some of you may remember it. The whales were trapped up in the ice off of Point Barrow. And it's a wonderful story about how, as Alaskans, we came together working with the Russians, all agencies, environmental groups who would normally be in great opposition to oil development folks, all coming together for a common purpose to do good things. And that movie, Big Miracle, reminded me that in Alaska we've got a few more big miracles that we can brag about, and it begins with people who really make the health and safety and the well-being of others their top priority, even when they don't know any of these people. I know that the people of Nome and Cordova and the people of Valdez all give thanks to those who have stepped up during these tough winter months to bail us out, shovel us out, but to be there at our side. So I thank you for the extra time that you have given me. I thank my colleague from Illinois for that. But again, extend my heartfelt thanks to our United States Coast Guard men and women, as well as the fine men and women of the Alaska National Guard. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Illinois.
Mr. President, let me thank my colleague from Alaska. This week on National Public Radio, there was a feature about Cordova and all the snow that they are trying to deal with there. And I'm sure this is perhaps commonplace in your great state, but as we listen to it in Chicago and feel blessed that we really haven't been hit too hard yet this winter, our hearts go out to the men and women in the Coast Guard, National Guard in Alaska, and the people who are struggling in your communities to survive these natural disasters. Mr. President, each of us takes on an agenda in Congress of things that are important to us personally, and sometimes one or two of those issues become very, very personal and very important to you. The one that has become very personal to me relates to the DREAM Act. The DREAM Act is a bill that I introduced 10 years ago. 10 years ago. Now, to serve in the Senate, you have to be a patient person because nothing happens quickly. But 10 years is long enough. And I'm urging my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to take a close look at this legislation today. First, to explain what it's all about. It's a bill that would allow students to literally earn legal status in America. These are students who came to the United States as children. They have been here for a long period of time. They have good moral character. They must graduate from high school, speak English, and complete at least 2 years of service to our country in the military or at least 2 years of college. I've talked to the presiding officer. That can include vocational training, which I think can be equally valuable to many young people. I certainly believe that that should be part of this conversation. The DREAM Act would make us a better and stronger country. These young people are waiting for the opportunity to contribute to America. I've come to the floor dozens of times now to tell their stories. There was a time when they were afraid to speak out and to identify themselves. But thank God that's changed. They now speak up because they understand that when people see who they are, what they have done, and what their dreams are, that they can appreciate the fact that these are good young people who, when given a chance, will make us a safer and stronger nation. That's why this proposal has been supported by the Department of Defense. They want these young people, these high school graduates of good character, to come into our military and make it better. And of course, many others see this as a valuable addition to our economy. Tomorrow's engineers and scientists and teachers and doctors and lawyers and entrepreneurs. These young people can make America a better place. I contacted the Obama administration, along with 21 of my colleagues earlier this year, or last year I should say, asking that they take a look at these young people when it comes to deportation. Understand, we estimate there are 11 million undocumented people in America. There are some who just say, oh, send them all back. That is not even in the realm of reality. And so I've asked the Obama administration, along with 20 of my colleagues, focus on those who are any danger to the United States and send them back, deport them. In fact, the Obama administration has done just that. And I've asked them as well, since we have limited resources, please try to identify those who might fall under the qualification of the DREAM Act and do not deport them. Now, there are some who argue, oh, wait a minute, they should all go. But we know we have limited resources for enforcement. If you are a state trooper parked on the side of a highway in Illinois or West Virginia, and the speed limit is 55 miles an hour, and one car comes by at 65 miles an hour, and the next one comes hurtling by at 110 miles an hour, and you can only go after one car, which one will you go after? You know the answer. You go after the car that's traveling so fast that it's a danger to the occupants and everyone else. The same thing is true when it comes to questions of deportation. Use good prosecutorial sound judgment with limited resources to deport only those people who could be a threat or danger to this United States. That's the first priority. Just earlier today, Senator Grassley, who is the ranking member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, came to the floor and claimed that the Obama administration is using this discretionary authority to implement the DREAM Act because it failed to pass Congress. I respectfully disagree with my friend from Iowa. The DREAM Act would give these young people a chance to earn legal status. That is not the case when it comes to deportation. Even if they are not deported, they are still not in a legal, a permanent legal situation here in the United States. Their future is still in doubt and in question. So there's no parallel as far as that's concerned. I've come to the floor many times to introduce those who follow this debate to these young people, to get to know who they are and why I think this cause is important and their lives are important to us. Let me introduce today two of them. This is Ala Makaho. Ala is of Palestinian descent, was brought to the United States by her parents 19 years ago when she was 7 years old. She is 26 and she grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, my home state. She was an honors student in high school and graduated from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, a great university, with a bachelor's degree in architecture. She sent me a letter and here's what she said. Being undocumented and with no pathway to citizenship means I actually can't use my architectural degree. It means I can't get a job and move forward with my life. This year, once again, we wait for Congress to do the right thing and give undocumented young people all across America a chance to better serve our communities and our country. I'm an asset to this country, a resource with a desire to make good use of my degree. I want to be able to work and design affordable housing for low-income communities. In the finest American tradition, Ala has become an activist. She has stepped out to introduce herself to America. So we know who these DREAM Act students are and what they could mean to the future of our nation. Let me also introduce to you this lovely young lady, Maria Luna. Maria has a heartbreaking but inspiring story. Her mother lives in the United States, but just before she was to be born in the United States, her mother fled the country and gave birth to her on the Mexican side of the border. Maria's mother abandoned her in Mexico at that point, left her when she was only 3 days old. Luckily, her grandmother stepped in and started raising Maria in Los Angeles, California. Her grandmother passed away when Maria was 10 years old. After her grandmother's death, Maria went to live with her biological mother, who unfortunately was abusive, both physically and emotionally, to this young woman. While she was in high school, Maria learned that she did not have legal status because she was actually born across the border in Mexico. She asked her mother to file the papers for her so that she could be legal in America. Her mother refused. And she threatened to turn her in to the authorities if she caused any trouble at home. Maria persevered. She became a straight-A student. She graduated from high school with a 4.2 GPA. This is what she said. Even though everything that I was facing at home, even through everything that I was facing at home, I was able to find relief at school. At school, I felt worthy. My dignity was returned. I was valued based on my merit and drive. In 2010, Maria graduated from California State University of Sacramento. She also decided to start to tell her story publicly about why she believes the DREAM Act is so important. Maria wants to go to business school and become an entrepreneur. She's begun a career in modeling, as you can tell, a lovely young lady. And although she doesn't have legal status and can't really be paid for her work, she sent me a letter, and here's what she said. Through my involvement with the DREAM Act, I have learned of many students who, like me, have excelled despite tough odds. One thing that we all share in common is our hunger to succeed and give back to this country. My dreams and ambitions are all for America. This is where I belong. I know no other home. It is here that I was given an opportunity. It is here that I've become educated. America adopted me and raised me as her own. And because of that, I am forever indebted to her. All I want is to have the ability to give back to my country. Mr. President, you and I know that this is a nation of immigrants. We are fortunate that at some point in the past, our parents and grandparents had the courage and determination to come to these shores and fight the odds. They came here speaking broken English, if any English. They persevered through the rejection of people who wanted nothing to do with immigrants. They took the dirtiest, hardest jobs available because that was it, and they prayed that their kids would have a better life. That was the immigrant's dream, and it always has been. That is the dream of these children, that they can have a better life, that they can make this a better country. All they're asking for is a chance to earn the right to be legal, to earn it, not to be given it, but earn it. I'm going to continue to work for passage of the DREAM Act. I hope that my colleagues on both sides of the aisle will look at this in an honest and fair way. I know that immigration has been a hot-button issue since right after the Pilgrims got off the Mayflower. The next boat that arrived, I'm sure some of the Pilgrims said, oh, not more of those people. Well, that's the story of America. And thank goodness a lot of those immigrants from Italy, from Lithuania, from Poland, from China, from Mexico, decided to stick it out and fight for their future. These young people deserve that same opportunity. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Wyoming.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I come to the floor today, as I have week after week ever since the President's health care law was passed, to bring a doctor's second opinion about the health care law. I've traveled the state all the last week in Wyoming talking to people about the things that they look for in a health care law, which is what they want as patients, as citizens, and they look at it as what they're looking for is the care they need from a doctor that they want at the price they can afford. And across the board, they do not believe that they are getting that with the health care law that was passed in this body and then in the House and signed by President Obama during the last couple of years of the administration. And it's interesting as we went to the floor of the House in the House chamber this past week for the President's State of the Union speech. It was almost 7,000 words, and he focused very little on the health care law. You say, well, why is that? Well, it seems pretty obvious. It's because that law was unpopular when it was passed, and it is actually more unpopular with the American people today than it was the day it was passed. And the more people find out about it, the less popular it becomes. And even the White House understands that this law is deeply flawed, it's extremely unpopular, and it actually makes it harder for small businesses to create jobs. So when the President wants to talk about job creation in America, he realizes that his health care law isn't helping, and it's actually making it worse. I had town hall meetings, different communities around Wyoming last week, and when you gather a group of people together, and our colleagues ought to do the same thing in their own communities, in their own home state. You know, ask a group of people, do you believe under this health care law that, you remember the one that the President promised that if you passed that the cost of your insurance would go down? Remember that law? Do you believe that after that was passed do you believe that your health care costs will actually go up? How many believe the cost of your care will go up and your insurance will go up? Every hand goes up. And then you ask those same people who now say they're going to end up paying more, you say, do you think that the quality, because there's a lot of discussion about quality and access and concerns about care, do you believe that the quality of your care will go down? Again, the hands go up. So we have people that are saying we're going to be paying more and getting less, and that's not what I want. So today I'm here to discuss something about the health care law that the President really did leave out of his big speech on Tuesday night, and that's the issue of waivers. January 6th, while we were all back in our home communities, many people talking to folks around their home state, January 6th, while Congress was not in session, the House was not in session, the Senate was not in session, the administration ended their program that has really been a major embarrassment to the Obama administration. And month by month, the President has had to announce that he had to issue more and more waivers from his health care law. Waivers that the President granted to unions, to businesses, and to insurers. Each and every waiver served as a clear admission that the health care law, as written, didn't get the job done, doesn't work. Well, as of now, January 6, 2012, the administration has issued a total number of waivers that covers more than 4.1 million Americans. Over 1,700 waivers were given, covering more than 4.1 million Americans. Now, interestingly, of all of those people, a very small percentage of them, of workers in this country, are union workers. But yet, over half of all the waivers given, 2.2 million of those people were those who are covered with union insurance. So you have 4.1 million Americans given waivers, 2.2 million people with union insurance got a waiver. That's 54% of all of the waivers went to union employees who supported the health care law. These are the people that were out in the streets rallying. They say, we want the health care law. They have it on their websites. They had celebrations when it was passed. And then, remember what Nancy Pelosi said, first you have to pass it before you get to find out what's in it. And as all these people getting their insurance through unions found out, that if they complied with the law as written, that it would break their policies, break their programs, and they said, we cannot afford to have this law apply to us. Please give us a waiver. 2.2 million people with union insurance got a waiver. And as I say, they let the word out January 6th, 2012, while Congress was not in session and while people were focused on other things. Well, the rest of America's small business owners were not so lucky. A new poll from the Chamber of Commerce found that 78% of small businesses surveyed reported that taxation, regulation, and legislation from Washington made it harder for their businesses to hire more workers. In that same poll, these are the small businesses of the country, the people that are the job creators. In that same poll, 74% of small business owners said the recent health care law makes it harder for their business to hire more employees. Now, aren't these the very people that we're asking to go out and hire more workers, to get America back to work? But yet the President and the Democrats' health care law is making it harder for 74% of our small businesses in this country to hire more employees. So how did we get here? Well, in May of 2011, I came to the Senate floor right here and explained that the waiver recipients, under the way it worked, had to reapply because they were getting annual benefit waiver limits year after year after year. Well, realizing what an embarrassment this drip, drip, drip of new waivers was going to be by the administration, in August of 2011, the administration switched course. The Department of Health and Human Services announced that at that point, if you wanted a waiver, you were going to have to apply for a final waiver that would carry on all the way through 2014, a three-year waiver. And they wanted to get all of this out by the beginning of 2012 so it wouldn't be a continued election year embarrassment for this president, this administration, and those who voted for it. This scheme allowed the administration to dodge issuing more waivers leading up to the 2012 presidential election. It's clear that these waivers were going to be an election year embarrassment for the president. They were an embarrassment because each and every waiver was yet another reminder to the American people that President Obama's health care law wasn't working. The president promised, and we remember hearing him loud and clear, that if you like the health insurance plan you have, he said, then you could keep it. Well, what he meant was, to keep the coverage you have, if you like it, you may need a waiver from Washington. I also want to talk for a moment about what happens now that the September deadline has passed and these 4 million waivers have been granted. It's now no longer possible to apply for an annual benefit limit waiver, no longer an option for business owners in this country. So that means that it leaves hardworking Americans who want to start a new business forced to choose between two options, and I think they're bad options. One, they can offer high-cost, government-approved health insurance. Well, that's going to make it very expensive for them to try to open a new business and hire workers. The expense of opening that business may likely be too great. So those jobs are not created and unemployment rates stay high. Or, two, don't offer coverage at all because they can't afford the health care law's onerous mandates. And if they choose that second option, what happens ultimately? Well, the American taxpayers will end up footing the bill. With a $15 trillion debt and unemployment hovering around 8.5%, the last thing we should do is adopt policies like this health care law and then this waiver plan that discourage America's best and brightest from starting new companies and hiring new workers. But that's exactly what President Obama's health care law does. Stifles innovation, strangles the market, and it straddles the American people with more debt. This is just another example showing how the President's health care policies are making the situation worse. His policies are hurting America's economy. His policies are making the standard of living in America worse. His policies are making health care in America worse. And his policies are making America's debt worse. You know, almost immediately after President Obama signed his health care bill into law, the employers around the country began to sound the alarm. They said that the health care law's annual benefit limit policy would force them to stop offering health insurance to hundreds of thousands of Americans and their families. That's why the administration came up with this waiver idea. Nowhere in the health care law is the Secretary of Health and Human Services granted explicit authority to start an annual benefit limit waiver program. Nowhere in the law. What the administration should have done was come to Congress and ask for help to fix the problem that they had created. That would mean, however, that the President and Washington Democrats would have to admit that their health care law was flawed. Washington Democrats crafted a policy mandating that everyone must buy government-approved health insurance. In many cases, it's insurance that these individuals don't need, don't want, and cannot afford. The President pushed his mandates on the American people without understanding how limited health insurance products work in the marketplace. The administration simply ignored the fact that many employers cannot afford to offer the Cadillac health insurance coverage to their workers that the government is mandating. But now, if those businesses don't have a waiver already, they won't be able to offer their employees any insurance coverage at all. And new business startups won't have the opportunity to ask for a waiver. Those employers might have wanted to offer some basic level of health insurance coverage to their new employees. But thanks to the Obama administration, they won't be able to offer anything at all because of the expense. This is just another example of Washington Democrats pushing a one-size-fits-all, we-know-best policy where they think they know what's best for all of the people of this country. How many more disruptive ticking time bombs are there lurking in this health care law? We don't know because many of the provisions do not even go into effect until 2014 or later. And that's why, Mr. President, I come to the floor week after week giving a doctor's second opinion to mention and to tell that I intend to fight each and every day to make sure the American people will never have to find out come 2014. I am committed more than ever to repeal the health care law, repeal it and replace it with health care reforms that help American families get the care they need from a doctor that they want at a price they can afford. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, this isn't the time for a debate with my friend, the distinguished senator from Wyoming. But I would just say that there are two sides to this story. Try to have my friend, the senator from Wyoming, explain to Jeff Hill, a young man who, within 2 weeks after turning age 24, he had to go off his parents' insurance when he turned 23. He got testicular cancer. His parents had to spend money they didn't have, borrow money they didn't have, to take care of the problems that this young man developed with testicular cancer. All the surgery and radiation and all the other chemo that he had. And try to have him explain to the more than 2 million seniors who have been able to have wellness checks as a result of this law that we passed. How about, Mr. President, the people in Nevada who have come to me with tears in their eyes explaining to me that their daughter or son now has the ability to have insurance because they can't be denied insurance because of pre-existing disability. So, and that's why, Mr. President, we've seen this litigation which has been generated, which the appellate courts by some 3-2 margin have favored the law, including a brilliant decision written by an extremely conservative judge, Judge Silberman in the D.C. Court of Appeals, who upheld this law. And that's why many consumer groups have joined in the appeal to the United States Supreme Court, along with the pharmaceutical industry, along with the insurance companies, because this is something that's good for the American consumer. And that's why it was so unfortunate that the Republicans blocked someone that would help consumers, and the financial wizardry that took place on Wall Street that basically tore down the economies of so many different states. We wanted, and when we passed the Dodd-Frank bill, to make sure that consumers were protected. And that's why we tried for months and months to have someone selected to fill that spot. The Republicans said, we don't like the law. We like him, but we don't like the law, so we don't want the law effectuated, so we're just not going to approve him. And they didn't. And that's why President Obama, under the terms of the Constitution that's written to protect this country, has in the power of that Constitution recess appointments, and that's what he did to protect the consumer. The health care law that we passed protects the consumer. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to appear to morning business. Senators permitted to speak for up to 10 minutes each.
Objection.
Mr. President, I move to proceed to calendar number 301, S2038.
Is there objection? Without objection, the clerk will report the motion.
The Senator from Nevada, Mr. Reed, moves to consider calendar number 301 as 2038, a bill to prohibit members of Congress and employees of Congress from using non-public information derived from their official positions for personal benefit and for other purposes.
Mr. President, I ask consent the mandatory quorum under Rule 22 be waived.
You went too far.
And Mr. President, I got ahead of myself. I was in a hurry here. Senator Grassley wanted to speak, and I guess he's left. There's a cloture motion at the desk, and that needs to be reported.
Clerk will report.
Cloture motion. We undersigned senators in accordance with the provisions of Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate hereby move to bring to a close the debate on the motion to proceed to calendar number 301 S2038, the Stop Trading on Congressional Knowledge Act, signed by 18 senators as follows: Reed of Nevada, Lieberman, Brown of Ohio, Manchin, Udall of New Mexico, Beckidge, Cole, Nelson of Florida, Lautenberg, Shaheen, Blumenthal, Cardin, Coons, Feinstein, Leahy, Durbin, Murray, and Schumer.
I ask consent the mandatory quorum under Rule 22 be waived for that the cloture vote on the motion to proceed to S2038 occur at 5:30 p.m. Monday, January 30th.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I now ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to consideration H.R. 3800, which we received from the House and is at the desk.
Clerk will report.
H.R. 3800, an act to amend the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 to extend the funding and expenditure authority of the Airport and Airway Trust Fund and so forth and for other purposes.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed to the measure.
I ask unanimous consent the bill be read 3 times, passed, motion to reconsider be laid on the table. There be no intervening action or debate, and any statements related to this matter be placed in the record at the appropriate places if read.
Without objection.
I now ask consent the Senate proceed H.R. 3801.
Clerk will report.
H.R. 3801, an act to amend the Tariff Act of 1930 to clarify the definition of aircraft and the offenses penalized under the aviation smuggling provisions under that act and for other purposes.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed to the measure.
I ask consent the bill be read 3 times, passed, motion to reconsider be laid on the table. There be no intervening action or debate. Any statements related to this matter be placed in the record at the appropriate places if read.
Without objection.
Mr. President, it's my understanding this is legislation that has been pushed by Gabrielle Giffords, who resigned from the House of Representatives yesterday. What a wonderful statement that was made by members of the House yesterday, signifying the great courage that the whole country feels about this gallant woman. And we all wish her the very, very best in her future, which, with her strength and courage and that heroic husband standing by her side, an astronaut, I'm sure that she will fare better than we can even imagine. I ask consent that we now proceed to S2039.
Clerk will report.
as 2039, a bill to allow a state or local government to construct levees on certain properties otherwise designated as open space lands.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed to the measure.
Consent that the Boxer substitute amendment be agreed to. The bill is amended be read a third time passed. Motion we consider be laid on the table, and that any statements relating to this matter appear at the appropriate place in the record.
Without objection.
I now ask unanimous consent the Senate adjourn until 2 p.m. on Monday, January 30th. Following the prayer and the pledge, general proceedings be approved today. The morning hour be deemed expired. Time for 2 leaders be reserved for use later in the day. The following interleader remarks, the Senate be in a period of morning business until 4:30 p.m. with senators permitted to speak for 10 minutes each, and that at 4:30 p.m. the Senate resume consideration of the motion to proceed to calendar number 301, with the time until 5:30 p.m. equally divided between the 2 leaders or the designees. Mr. President, the next vote will take place next Monday at 5:30 p.m. on a motion to vote cloture on the motion to proceed to S 203 of the Stock Act. There's no further business come before the Senate. I ask that it adjourn following the statements of Senator Bozeman and Senator Hatch. Said statements be limited to 15 minutes each.
Without objection.
Mr. President, if I could just take, I know that my friend from Arkansas is here to speak. This is the last day the group of pages that we've been with since September will spend in the Senate. I believe I'm going to be able to speak at their graduation. I'm quite sure that's true tomorrow. I think that the pages render such terrific service to this body. They do a lot of things. They get very little credit for what they do, but we depend on them for some of the most menial tasks a lot of times. But they're always, I've never had one treat me impolitely in all the years I've been in the Senate. And I can only speak from personal experience, and I've said this before on the Senate floor, and I'll say it again. My 2 oldest grandchildren, or granddaughters, they both served in the Senate as pages, and it really changed their lives. And I say that without any reservation. They became more in tune with what's going on in our country, and it hasn't left them. They look back with great, I don't know if reverence is the right word, because maybe that's the wrong choice of word, but they look back certainly fondly at the experience here in the Senate. And I hope these young men and women understand how much we appreciate what they do, and we do hope that, I do hope from a personal perspective that they have benefited as much as my 2 granddaughters did during the time here.
Mr. President.
Senator from Arkansas.
Thank you, Mr. President. We are constantly reminded of the sacrifices of American troops and their families. These brave Americans fight for our freedoms and our values while putting their own lives at risk. We must always remember their service and thank them for their patriotism, dedication, and commitment and honor, especially for those who have paid the ultimate price. Today I'm here to pay my respects to Arkansas soldier Sergeant First Class Benjamin Wise, who sacrificed his life for the love of his country while in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. Sergeant First Class Wise graduated from Westside Christian School in El Dorado, Arkansas in 1995 and enlisted in the military in 2000. Joining the Army as an infantryman assigned to the 520th Infantry Regiment, 2nd Infantry Division at Joint Base Lewis McChord. He discussed his military service with the Hope Star in 2004, saying that he was proud to be a soldier and he wanted to serve his country. In 2005, he volunteered for the Special Forces, something his sister Heather told the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette was something he talked about while growing up. His new position in the 3rd Battalion, 1st Special Forces Group suited him well. Sergeant First Class Wise' comrades said that he was a friend to all the members of his unit, cracking jokes and offering an ear to listen to all of their concerns. He was well aware of the dangers he faced, having served 4 deployments, twice to Iraq and twice to Afghanistan. His family says that Ben was proud of the career that he built in the Army. He was all too familiar with the sacrifices associated with work in war-torn Afghanistan after his brother, Jeremy Wise, a former Navy SEAL, working as a security contractor, was killed in the country in December of 2009. On Monday, January 9, 2012, Sergeant First Class Wise was injured during an attack by insurgents during a small arms fight. He passed away on January 15, 2012. Mr. President, Sergeant First Class Benjamin Wise is a true American hero. I ask my colleagues to keep his family, his wife Tracy, sons Luke and Ryan, and daughter Kaylin, and his friends and family in their thoughts and prayers during these very difficult times. And I humbly offer my appreciation, and I know I speak for the Senate and Congress as a whole, for the gratitude of this patriot and of his family for his selfless sacrifice. With that, I yield back.